It was an ordinary evening at the small, cozy cafe tucked on the corner of a quiet street. The warm lights reflected softly on the wooden tables, and the faint scent of coffee filled the air. She moved gracefully from table to table, balancing plates and cups with ease, always smiling politely at the customers. She was quiet by nature, keeping to herself mostly, but there was something about the way she listened to the hum of the cafe that made her special. She had a deep love for music, even though most people didn't notice it. During her breaks, she would sometimes sit at the old upright piano in the corner of the cafe. The piano was scratched and a little out of tune, but to her it was perfect. She would play soft melodies, not complicated pieces, just simple tunes that flowed naturally from her fingers. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about the feeling of the notes, the way the music could fill the empty spaces in her mind and heart. The regular customers didn't pay much attention. They were more interested in their coffees and conversations. But there was one man that evening who did. He was sitting near the back, dressed in a crisp suit, quietly observing the cafe and its people. He had a certain presence, not loud but commanding, and he noticed her as she hummed along to the music while clearing tables. There was a moment when she glanced at the piano while wiping down a table, and he saw the subtle spark in her eyes, the way she seemed to live in the music even when she wasn't playing. Curious, he called the waitress over. She approached cautiously, wondering if she had done something wrong. But instead of a complaint, he spoke in a tone that was polite but with an unmistakable weight. "I noticed you enjoy music," he said. "Would you be willing to play something for me? Nothing complicated, just something simple." She hesitated, caught off guard. She wasn't used to being singled out like this, especially by someone who clearly moved in a world very different from hers. But there was a warmth in his request, a genuine interest in her talent, and she found herself nodding slowly. That night, after her shift, she couldn't stop thinking about it. The man had given her an invitation to a private gathering at his home, a luxurious place she had only ever seen in movies or magazines. It was a world of grand halls, sparkling chandeliers, and people who lived lives she could barely imagine. The thought made her nervous, but also excited. She loved music more than anything, and the idea that someone wanted to hear her play seriously, even if it was just a simple tune, made her heart race. When the day of the gathering arrived, she woke up early, her mind buzzing with anticipation and a touch of anxiety. She dressed simply but neatly, wanting to feel comfortable while still showing respect for the invitation. Her fingers itched to play, and she practiced softly in her room, running her hands over an old keyboard she kept tucked in the corner. The notes felt familiar under her fingers, and with each passing moment, her confidence grew. Arriving at the mansion was overwhelming. The gates were tall and imposing, and the driveway seemed to stretch on forever. She took a deep breath before stepping out of the car, her heart pounding in her chest. Inside, the house was more magnificent than she had imagined. The ceilings were high, decorated with intricate designs, and the floors gleamed under the bright chandeliers. Guests in elegant attire moved gracefully, talking quietly and sipping champagne. She was guided to a grand piano that sat at the center of the main hall. The instrument looked perfect, polished and inviting. She touched the keys lightly, feeling a familiar comfort. At first, she was careful, playing the simple tune she had been asked to perform. The notes filled the room softly, and she noticed the crowd listening politely, some nodding with approval, some merely curious. She felt her nerves settling a little as the music began to flow naturally. But as she continued, something changed. The simple tune she had been asked to play started to transform under her fingers. She added little flourishes here and there, subtle yet powerful, letting her emotions guide each movement. She wasn't thinking about impressing anyone. She was thinking about the music, about how it made her feel, about how it could touch the people around her. And it did. She saw eyes widen, heard a soft murmur of surprise, and felt the room leaning in, drawn to the passion she poured into every note. The man who had invited her watched quietly, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He had expected a simple performance, and yet he could see her talent unfolding in front of him, raw and real. The guests were captivated, not just by the music, but by the presence of someone so unassuming commanding such attention with nothing but her skill and her heart. By the time she finished the tune, the room was silent for a moment, as if everyone was holding their breath, reluctant to break the magic that had filled the space. Then, slowly, applause began to ripple through the crowd. It wasn't just polite clapping. It was genuine, heartfelt, a recognition of something extraordinary that had appeared in an ordinary place. She smiled shyly, her cheeks flushing, but inside, she felt a warmth and pride she had never known before. That night marked a turning point. She realized that her music had the power to connect with people in ways she hadn't imagined. And though she returned to her quiet life the next day at the cafe, a part of her had changed forever. The spark in her heart had grown, and she knew that the world of music was waiting for her, ready to be explored one note at a time. The evening had shown her that even the simplest beginnings could lead to moments of true brilliance, and she carried that lesson with her in every tune she played. The morning of the gathering arrived with a gentle sunlight streaming through her small apartment window. She woke up feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness, her thoughts still buzzing from the invitation she had received the night before. Today was different from any other day she had experienced. She had been to parties before, but never one like this, with such influential people, such wealth, and a grandeur she had only seen in movies. She carefully dressed in a simple yet elegant outfit, wanting to feel comfortable but also appropriate for the event. Her hands brushed over her keyboard as she practiced softly, letting the familiar sound calm her racing heart. When she stepped out of her apartment, the city felt unusually alive. The streets were bustling with cars and people, but her mind was focused entirely on the event ahead. The car ride to the mansion felt long, though it was only a few miles. She watched the buildings pass by, her fingers tapping lightly on her lap, imagining the music she would play. The piano had always been her safe place, a way to express feelings she couldn't put into words. She hoped she could convey those feelings tonight, even in front of strangers who had never seen her play. Arriving at the mansion, she paused at the entrance, taking in the towering gates and perfectly manicured gardens. The grandeur of it all was intimidating. Servants and assistants moved gracefully around, guiding guests to different areas of the house. She felt a flutter in her stomach but reminded herself that she had been invited because someone had recognized her talent. This was her chance and she intended to make it count. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The main hall was even more magnificent than she had imagined. The ceilings were high, decorated with ornate patterns, and crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow across the marble floors. Guests in flowing dresses and tailored suits moved gracefully, holding glasses of champagne and engaging in soft conversation. Music from a string quartet filled the background, creating a sophisticated ambience. She felt slightly out of place at first, a small-town waitress among people who clearly lived in a different world. But she reminded herself that tonight, it wasn't about where she came from. It was about the music she was about to share. She was led to a grand piano placed near the center of the hall. The instrument gleamed under the chandelier lights, its polished surface reflecting the guests as they moved. Her fingers itched to touch the keys. She felt a strange combination of fear and excitement, knowing that what she played would be watched closely. A few people had already gathered near the piano, curious about the young woman they had heard would be performing. She nodded politely to them, feeling the warmth of their curiosity rather than judgment. As she sat on the piano bench, she took a moment to steady her breathing. Her hands hovered above the keys, remembering the simple tune she had been asked to play. She began softly, her fingers moving over the keys in gentle, familiar patterns. The notes were clean and delicate, filling the room with a quiet elegance. At first, the crowd listened politely, expecting just a brief, simple performance. They did not yet realize that she had more to offer. Slowly, she began to let the music grow. She added small variations, little flourishes that were not part of the original tune. Her confidence grew with every note, and she allowed her emotions to guide her fingers. The simple melody transformed into something richer, more expressive. The guests leaned in slightly, their polite curiosity turning into genuine interest. The man who had invited her watched silently from a corner, a subtle smile forming on his face as he saw the young woman's talent unfold. She could feel the energy of the room changing. The once formal audience was now captivated, their attention fixed entirely on her and the piano. She let the music flow freely, her emotions becoming a part of every chord and every note. She wasn't thinking about impressing anyone. She was thinking about expressing herself, sharing a part of her soul through the music. And as she did, the room responded. There were nods of approval, gasps of surprise, and quiet murmurs of admiration. She could sense the amazement building around her. As the performance continued, she allowed herself to play more boldly. Her hands moved with precision and speed, creating a sound that was both powerful and delicate. She incorporated dynamics, crescendos, and gentle pauses, keeping the audience on the edge of their seats. Every note seemed to tell a story of a quiet girl with a love for music who had finally been given a stage to shine. The music filled every corner of the hall, and she felt a connection with the people around her. Even though they were strangers, they could feel her passion and dedication in every key she pressed. By the time she reached the finale, the room was completely silent, as if everyone was holding their breath. Then, as she struck the last note with gentle strength, there was a moment of stillness. The silence held for just a second, and then the hall erupted with applause. The clapping was loud and genuine, filled with admiration and amazement. Some guests were on their feet, cheering and applauding with enthusiasm. She smiled shyly, feeling a rush of warmth and pride she had never experienced before. The man who had invited her approached her, his expression filled with respect and awe. He congratulated her on a performance that exceeded all expectations. Others came forward as well, offering compliments and expressing their surprise at the depth of her talent. She listened politely, her cheeks flushed, and thanked them quietly. The recognition was overwhelming but also deeply fulfilling. For the first time, she realized that her love for music could open doors she had never imagined. After the performance, she was allowed to mingle with the guests, though she mostly stayed close to the piano, quietly observing the people she had played for. They were talking about her performance, sharing their astonishment with each other. She felt a strange sense of belonging in a place she had never expected to feel at home. The night had given her confidence, a glimpse into a world that seemed far away from her everyday life, and the belief that her music mattered. As the evening came to an end, she left the mansion with a mixture of relief and exhilaration. The air outside felt crisp and clean, and she took a deep breath, letting the excitement of the night settle in her chest. She knew that this was only the beginning, that her talent could take her far if she chose to pursue it. She had experienced something extraordinary, something that would stay with her forever. A night when her music had touched people's hearts and left them amazed. Walking back to her apartment, she replayed every moment in her mind, remembering the faces, the expressions, the way the music had flowed through the grand hall. She felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. Her quiet, simple life had intersected with a world of grandeur and influence, and she had held her own, letting her talent shine. She knew that from this moment on, she would never underestimate the power of her music again. And as she settled into her small apartment that night, she touched her keyboard softly, letting the notes carry her excitement, her joy, and the feeling that something remarkable had begun. Days passed after the unforgettable night at the mansion, but the memory of it lingered in her mind like a melody that would not fade. Each time she closed her eyes, she could see the grand hall, the sparkling chandeliers, the attentive faces, and feel the thrill of the music flowing through her fingers. Life at the cafe continued as usual, with its gentle rhythm of cleaning tables, serving coffee, and sharing small smiles with regular customers. But she carried something new inside her, a quiet fire, a sense of possibility that she had never felt before. Her coworkers noticed a subtle change in her demeanor. She moved with a little more confidence, her smile a touch brighter, though she didn't speak much about the night at the mansion. It was a personal memory, something she wanted to cherish quietly before sharing it with anyone. In her free moments, She found herself sitting at the cafe's old upright piano, practicing softly, exploring the melodies that had flowed so naturally at the gathering. She experimented with new patterns, sometimes letting her emotions guide her hands instead of the sheet music. Each note she played felt alive, and she could feel the music shaping her thoughts, giving them direction and meaning. Then came a surprise. The man who had invited her to the mansion contacted her again. He spoke with warmth and admiration, praising her performance and inviting her to return for another gathering. This time, he hinted at a slightly larger audience and a chance to play a longer piece. She felt a rush of excitement and nerves at the same time. It was an opportunity she could not ignore, though the thought of performing again in front of so many influential people made her heart race. Still, she accepted, determined to push herself further and embrace the challenge. As the day of the second gathering approached, she dedicated herself to preparation. She practiced for hours, letting the music flow naturally while also experimenting with new harmonies and dynamics. Her fingers moved with growing confidence, and her mind felt sharper, more focused. She imagined the audience again, not just as a crowd of strangers, but as people who could feel what she felt when she played. She wanted to convey more than notes. She wanted to share emotion, to tell a story with her music that words could not express. Arriving at the mansion that evening, she felt a mixture of familiarity and awe. The grand entrance greeted her once more, but this time she walked with a quieter confidence. Inside, the main hall was bustling with guests, more than before, each one engaged in conversation and enjoying the refined atmosphere. The string quartet played softly in the background, adding elegance to the gathering. She was guided to the grand piano once again, noticing how polished and inviting it looked, as if it had been waiting for her return. She sat on the bench and took a deep breath, letting the energy of the room settle over her. She glanced at the audience, seeing the curious faces that had gathered to hear her play. The man who had invited her smiled subtly, giving her a reassuring nod. She began softly, letting the familiar notes of the simple tune she had practiced fill the room. At first, the audience listened politely, not yet expecting the transformation that was about to come. As she played, she allowed the music to grow and evolve. Her hands moved with precision and emotion, adding small variations, delicate trills, and gentle flourishes that gave the melody new life. The audience leaned in, their curiosity turning into admiration as they realized that what started as a simple tune was now a performance filled with depth and passion. She was no longer just a waitress playing for polite entertainment. She was a musician telling a story through her fingers. Her confidence soared as she continued, and she began to explore more daring movements on the piano. The notes became richer, resonating through the hall, weaving a tapestry of sound that captured the attention of every listener. She felt the connection with the audience, sensing their awe and engagement. The music was no longer just her own. It had become a shared experience, a bridge between her quiet life and the grandeur of the gathering. At one point, she closed her eyes, letting the melody guide her entirely. Her fingers danced over the keys with skill and emotion, creating a sound that was both intricate and powerful. The audience watched in amazement, whispering to one another, captivated by the unexpected depth of her talent. Even the string quartet fell silent, allowing her music to take center stage, dominating the hall with a quiet strength that could not be ignored. The performance reached its peak, a crescendo of emotion and technical mastery that left the audience breathless. Every note told a part of her story, her journey from a quiet cafe to the grand stage of the mansion. The energy in the room was palpable. People felt the music deep within them, their attention rapt, their hearts stirred. And when the final note lingered and faded into silence, there was a moment of complete stillness. The audience seemed suspended, unsure whether to break the spell. Then slowly applause began, first polite, then growing louder, until it became a thunderous wave of appreciation. Guests rose to their feet, cheering and clapping, some with tears glistening in their eyes. The man who had invited her approached once more, visibly impressed, his words filled with admiration and encouragement. Others came forward as well, complimenting her performance, expressing astonishment at the depth and passion she had displayed. She smiled shyly, feeling a sense of pride and fulfillment that was almost overwhelming. Afterward, she mingled quietly with the guests, still near the piano, listening to the conversations around her. People were discussing her music, sharing how extraordinary it was, and she realized that her simple beginnings as a cafe pianist had led to something truly remarkable. She felt a sense of belonging she had never imagined, a connection to a world that had seemed distant and unreachable. The night had shown her that talent, dedication, and authenticity could create moments of real magic. When the gathering ended, she left the mansion feeling exhilarated. The night air was cool and refreshing, and she walked slowly, replaying the performance in her mind. Every note, every movement of her fingers, every reaction from the audience felt alive in her memory. She understood now that music had the power to transcend social boundaries, to touch hearts and minds, to communicate emotions that words could never capture. Returning to her apartment, she sat at her keyboard, letting the music pour out once more. It was no longer just practice. It was an expression of her journey, her growth, and her realization that she could achieve more than she had ever imagined. The quiet fire inside her burned brighter than ever, and she knew that this was only the beginning. The path ahead was uncertain, but she felt ready to embrace it, one note at a time, one performance at a time. She had discovered something extraordinary within herself, and nothing could take it away. The day of her third performance arrived, and she felt a mixture of excitement, nervousness, and determination unlike anything she had experienced before. She woke up early, her mind alive with the melodies she had been imagining for days. The small apartment felt quiet and still, but inside her, a storm of emotion and anticipation was building. She dressed carefully, choosing simple yet elegant clothes that made her feel confident without drawing unnecessary attention. Her fingers itched to touch the keys, to bring the music that lived in her heart into the world outside her small room. The ride to the mansion was quieter than before, her mind focused entirely on the performance ahead. She thought about the guests, the grandeur of the hall, and the power of music to reach people in ways words never could. Her fingers tapped gently against her leg as she rehearsed the tunes in her head, imagining the ebb and flow of the melody, the crescendos, the gentle pauses, and the emotional depth she wanted to convey. She knew this performance would be different. It had to be. When she arrived, the mansion was more alive than ever. The hall buzzed with conversations, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. The crowd was larger, more diverse, and she could feel their expectations pressing against her even before she sat at the piano. The string quartet played softly in the background, their music creating a refined atmosphere. But she knew that once she began, all attention would shift to her. She walked toward the grand piano with quiet confidence, her heart beating steadily, her mind focused. As she settled onto the bench, she took a deep breath, feeling the familiar touch of the polished keys beneath her fingers. She began with the simple tune she had been asked to perform, letting it flow naturally, softly, and delicately. At first, the audience listened politely, some with faint smiles, others with casual curiosity. But she had something more inside her that was ready to be unleashed. The music had grown within her over the past weeks, nourished by practice, imagination, and a deep emotional connection that no one could see but everyone could feel. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, she began to add variations, subtle changes that enriched the simple melody. Her fingers moved with precision and grace, guiding the notes to convey not just sound, but emotion. The audience leaned in, their polite attention turning into genuine curiosity, their eyes widening as the tune began to transform. She was no longer just playing a simple song. She was creating a living, breathing piece of music that had depth, emotion, and power. The room seemed to change with her playing. Every note resonated, filling the air with a sense of wonder. She felt a surge of confidence and allowed herself to explore more complex patterns. Trills, arpeggios, and subtle harmonies weaved together seamlessly, creating a texture of sound that was both intricate and accessible. She felt completely absorbed, as though the world outside the piano had disappeared, leaving only the connection between her, the keys, and the audience. The spectators were captivated, leaning forward, completely drawn in by the music and the story it told. Her performance began to grow in intensity. She introduced dynamics, gentle at first, then bold, powerful crescendos that echoed across the hall. Each note was deliberate, each pause meaningful. The music conveyed a journey, a passage from quiet contemplation to fiery expression, reflecting her own emotions, her fears, her hopes, and her dreams. The audience felt it, responding not just with polite applause, but with a sense of awe and wonder. They were witnessing something rare and beautiful, a raw talent expressing itself in a moment of pure artistry. She closed her eyes and let the music guide her entirely, allowing instinct and emotion to dictate every movement. The piano became an extension of herself, her fingers communicating feelings that words could never capture. The audience could feel it too. Gasps of surprise, whispers of admiration, and attentive silence filled the room as they realized the performance was unlike anything they had expected. A simple tune had grown into a powerful, emotional masterpiece that seemed to tell the story of a quiet young woman with a heart full of music and a soul ready to shine. The man who had invited her watched closely, his expression a mix of pride and amazement. He had known she had talent, but even he could not have anticipated the depth and intensity she brought to the piano. Guests who had initially doubted her abilities now found themselves leaning forward, completely captivated. They could see her dedication, her heart, and her courage reflected in every note. She had transformed from a quiet cafe pianist into a commanding presence, a storyteller whose medium was the music itself. As the performance reached its climax, the music soared, powerful and passionate, yet filled with subtlety and grace. Every chord, every trill, every gentle pause held meaning, creating a rich tapestry that carried the audience through emotion, thought, and wonder. She felt completely in the moment, unaware of time, place, or audience, fully immersed in the act of creation. The energy of the hall seemed to respond to her, amplifying her passion, and in return, she poured even more of herself into the performance. The final notes lingered in the air, delicate and fading, leaving a profound silence in their wake. The audience held their breath for just a moment, reluctant to break the spell. And then, as if released from a collective trance, applause erupted. It was thunderous, overwhelming, heartfelt. Guests rose to their feet, cheering, clapping, and some even wiping away tears of astonishment and admiration. She smiled, her cheeks flushed, feeling a rush of warmth and fulfillment unlike anything she had experienced before. The man who had invited her stepped forward, his eyes bright with emotion. He congratulated her, expressing admiration not only for her technical skill but for the passion and soul she had infused into her music. Other guests came forward, offering compliments, astonished at the depth of talent displayed by someone they had first assumed would play a simple tune. She listened quietly, smiling, feeling both proud and humbled. Her music had spoken, and it had been heard, truly heard, by people who mattered. After the performance, she mingled briefly with the guests but mostly stayed near the piano, reflecting on what had just happened. The night had been a revelation. She had discovered not only her own potential but the power of music to transcend expectations, to touch hearts, and to create connections between people who might otherwise never meet. She felt a deep sense of purpose, knowing that her talent was something she could cultivate, share, and grow. The applause, the admiration, and the astonishment were gratifying, but the real reward was the understanding that she had made a genuine impact. As the gathering came to an end, she stepped outside into the cool night air. The streets were quiet, the world calm, yet inside her, the fire of passion and ambition burned brighter than ever. She walked slowly, replaying the performance in her mind, remembering every note, every chord, and every expression she had seen on the faces of the audience. The night had been transformative, showing her that even the quietest, most unassuming individuals could create moments of true brilliance. Returning to her small apartment, she sat at her keyboard, letting her fingers glide over the keys once more. The music flowed freely, now infused with the confidence and experience of the evening. Each note reminded her of the journey she had begun, the progress she had made, and the future that awaited. She knew that this was only the beginning of something extraordinary, a path where her talent, passion, and dedication could lead her to places she had never dreamed of. And as she played into the quiet night, she felt alive, empowered, and ready for whatever the next performance, the next challenge, and the next opportunity might bring. The applause that followed her final note was louder and more enthusiastic than she had ever experienced before. She sat there for a moment, letting the sound wash over her, feeling the vibrations through the piano and into her body. It was a mixture of admiration, awe, and excitement that made her chest feel both heavy and light at the same time. People were standing, clapping, some even cheering. She could see expressions of astonishment and delight on their faces, and for the first time, she felt the true power of her music reaching beyond herself. The man who had first noticed her in the cafe approached, a broad smile on his face. "I knew you had something special," he said, his voice warm with admiration. "But tonight, you showed everyone here that your talent is extraordinary." She nodded, humbled, feeling both proud and shy. She had never performed in front of so many people, and certainly never received such heartfelt recognition. Other guests came forward, expressing their amazement and asking her questions about how long she had played, where she had learned, and what inspired her. She answered softly, explaining that she had mostly taught herself, guided by her love for music and countless hours of practice. People were curious, and their curiosity quickly turned into admiration. A few influential guests suggested that she consider performing publicly, perhaps at local concerts or private events. They spoke enthusiastically about the potential they saw in her, and she listened with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. For someone who had always lived quietly, never imagining that her music could reach beyond the cafe, this was a revelation. Her talent, once hidden and underestimated, was now being recognized and appreciated by people who could open doors she had only dreamed of. She felt a strange mixture of emotions: joy, humility, nervousness, and exhilaration. Each compliment, each expression of admiration, added to a growing sense of purpose within her. She realized that music was not just a hobby or a personal refuge. It was a way to connect with others, to share a piece of herself, and to create moments of beauty and emotion that people would remember. Her heart swelled with the realization that she had something meaningful to offer, something that mattered. After the initial wave of admiration, she was invited to stay and mingle with the guests. She moved quietly through the room, speaking with a few of them, listening to their stories and experiences. Despite the grandeur of the mansion and the wealth of the people around her, she felt a sense of equality through the music. In those moments, she was not a waitress or an outsider. She was a musician, recognized for her skill, her heart, and her dedication. The music had created a bridge between her world and theirs, connecting them in a way that nothing else could. As the evening progressed, she noticed some guests quietly discussing opportunities for her to perform elsewhere. One suggested a local concert hall, another mentioned a charity event that could use her talent to draw attention and raise funds. She listened carefully, absorbing the possibilities without feeling overwhelmed. The idea that her music could be appreciated by even more people, that it could touch lives beyond this evening, was exhilarating. She began to imagine herself performing in new places, sharing her music with people she had never met, and inspiring them the way she had inspired the audience tonight. She returned to the piano once more, not to perform, but simply to touch the keys and feel the connection that had brought her here. Her fingers moved softly, recalling the melodies she had played, the crescendos, the pauses, the subtle dynamics that had captured the room's attention. The guests watched quietly, some sitting nearby, some standing at a respectful distance, appreciating the way she could express herself so fully through music. The quiet intimacy of those moments reminded her that the true power of music was in its ability to communicate emotions and stories without words. One guest, an older woman who had been quietly observing, approached her and spoke with a gentle tone. "You have a gift," she said, "not just for playing but for connecting with people. Your music tells a story, and people can feel it. That is rare." The words touched her deeply. She had always loved music, but she had never thought of it as a way to connect so profoundly with others. Hearing someone acknowledge that ability gave her confidence and motivation to continue exploring and developing her talent. The applause began to fade, and the evening slowly came to a close. Guests began to leave, offering final words of admiration and encouragement. She thanked each person politely, feeling a sense of fulfillment and gratitude that was almost overwhelming. The mansion, once intimidating, now felt like a place where she had proven herself, where she had shared a part of her soul and been recognized for it. She walked through the hall, touching the piano keys softly as she passed, feeling a deep connection to the instrument and the music that had carried her through the night. Outside, the night was calm and quiet, the city lights shimmering in the distance. She took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill her lungs, and felt a sense of peace and accomplishment. The experience had changed her, opened her eyes to the possibilities that lay ahead, and strengthened her love for music. She knew that this was not the end of her journey but rather a beginning. The recognition, the admiration, and the opportunities that had emerged tonight were signs that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. Walking home, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the quiet cafe where she had first played simple tunes, to the grand mansion filled with influential guests, each step had been a learning experience, a moment of growth. She realized that her talent, combined with dedication and passion, had the power to create change, to inspire, and to connect people in ways that were deeply meaningful. The fire that had been kindled within her that first night had grown stronger, fueled by every performance, every note, and every moment of recognition. Back in her small apartment, she sat at her keyboard once again, letting her fingers move freely across the keys. The music flowed naturally, reflecting the emotions of the evening, the excitement, the pride, the humility, and the joy. She played not for an audience, not for recognition, but for herself, and in doing so, she felt the truest sense of fulfillment. The journey had been long, the path uncertain, but the power of music had guided her, given her purpose, and revealed a potential she had never fully understood. As the night wore on, she played into the quiet hours, feeling alive, inspired, and ready for whatever the future might hold, knowing that her music had the power to leave a lasting impression on everyone who heard it. The following weeks after the third gathering were filled with a whirlwind of emotions and opportunities she had never imagined. Invitations to perform at different events began arriving, both private and public, each one a chance to share her music with a wider audience. She felt a mixture of excitement, nervousness, and determination. Each invitation reminded her that her talent was no longer hidden in the quiet corners of a cafe. It had become something people recognized, valued, and wanted to experience. She approached each new opportunity carefully, determined to stay true to herself while embracing the possibilities that her music could bring. Her mornings began with long hours of practice, exploring melodies, experimenting with harmonies, and refining her skills. She would play for hours, losing herself in the rhythm and flow, letting the music guide her fingers and thoughts. It was not just about technical perfection. It was about emotion, expression, and connection. Every note she played carried a piece of her heart, and she knew that audiences responded not just to the sound, but to the sincerity and passion behind it. She had grown more confident in her abilities, but she remained humble, understanding that talent alone was not enough. It needed dedication, focus, and heart. One afternoon, she received an invitation to perform at a charity event in the city's Grand Theater. The opportunity was unlike anything she had faced before. The theater was historic, its stage enormous, and the audience expected to be entertained and moved. She felt a surge of nervousness at the thought of performing for so many people, yet she also felt an undeniable excitement. This was a stage where she could truly challenge herself and let her music reach an even larger audience. She accepted without hesitation, knowing that every performance was a step forward on her journey. The night of the performance, she arrived at the theater, marveling at the grandeur of the venue. The lights were bright, the seats filled with eager faces, and the air buzzed with anticipation. Backstage, she felt a mix of anxiety and exhilaration. She focused on her breathing, letting the music calm her mind, and reminded herself that she had faced larger audiences before. This was just another opportunity to share her heart through the piano. When she stepped onto the stage, the audience quieted, their attention focused entirely on her. She approached the grand piano at the center, feeling its polished keys under her fingers. She began with the familiar simple tune she had first played in the cafe, softly and delicately. The audience listened, intrigued, expecting a short performance. But as the music flowed, she allowed it to grow and transform, adding subtle flourishes and emotional depth. The melody evolved into something richer, something that told a story, capturing the attention and imagination of everyone in the theater. Her hands moved with confidence and grace, exploring new dynamics, harmonies, and rhythms. She played with emotion, allowing her feelings to guide every note. The audience was mesmerized, drawn into the story she was telling without words. Gasps of surprise, soft murmurs of admiration, and attentive silence filled the theater as she continued. The music conveyed joy, longing, tension, and release. A journey through her heart and soul, shared openly with strangers who were moved by her talent. As the performance reached its climax, she allowed herself to play with boldness and intensity, weaving intricate patterns and powerful crescendos. The music resonated through the theater, filling every corner and touching every listener. She felt a deep connection with the audience, sensing their engagement, their emotion, and their amazement. The power of the piano, the depth of her expression, and the authenticity of her performance created a moment of pure magic. Every note, every pause, and every flourish was a testament to her growth, her dedication, and her unwavering passion for music. When the final note faded, there was a brief moment of silence, as if the audience was holding its breath, unwilling to break the spell. Then, slowly, applause erupted, growing louder and more enthusiastic with each passing second. People rose to their feet, cheering, clapping, and some even shedding tears of admiration and joy. She smiled shyly, feeling overwhelmed by the depth of emotion in the room and the acknowledgement of her talent. For the first time, she fully realized the power of her music, not just to entertain, but to touch hearts, inspire, and create unforgettable experiences. After the performance, she was approached by several organizers, event planners, and music enthusiasts, all eager to work with her, hear her play again, and support her journey. They offered opportunities for concerts, collaborations, and even recordings. She listened carefully, grateful and humbled, understanding that each offer represented not only recognition but also responsibility. She wanted to continue growing, to share her music with even more people, and to maintain the authenticity that had brought her this far. Returning home that night, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from the small cafe to the grand theater. Every performance, every note, every moment of connection had shaped her, built her confidence, and revealed a path she had never imagined. She understood now that talent alone was only the beginning. Passion, dedication, authenticity, and the courage to embrace opportunities were what allowed her music to flourish and resonate with others. In the days that followed, she continued to play at the cafe, but it was no longer just a place of practice or comfort. It had become a foundation, a reminder of where she began and the journey that had carried her forward. Regular customers noticed the subtle change in her demeanor, the quiet confidence, and the energy that seemed to radiate from her. They sensed that something extraordinary had grown within her, something that could not be contained by the walls of the cafe. She began to explore new compositions, creating original pieces that expressed her emotions, experiences, and imagination. Her music became a reflection of her journey. Each piece a story, each note a part of her soul. She shared these compositions with audiences, both large and small, and felt the joy of connection, knowing that her music could move people in ways words could not. The quiet girl who had once played simple tunes at a small cafe had transformed into a musician with vision, passion, and a powerful voice. Months later, she found herself performing at another grand venue, this time for a large audience that had come specifically to hear her play. She walked onto the stage with calm confidence, greeted by the anticipation of eager listeners. She approached the piano, feeling the familiar comfort of the keys under her fingers. As she began to play, the audience was drawn into her world, captivated by the depth, beauty, and emotion in every note. She played not just to impress, but to connect, to share, and to inspire. The performance was met with overwhelming acclaim. The audience rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, moved by the power and sincerity of her music. She smiled, her heart full, knowing that every moment of practice, every performance, and every opportunity had led her to this point. Her journey was far from over, but she had discovered her voice, her power, and her ability to touch lives through the universal language of music. As she returned home, she sat at her keyboard, reflecting on the incredible journey she had undertaken. From the quiet cafe to grand mansions and theaters, from simple tunes to fiery performances that left audiences speechless, she had grown, learned, and transformed. She understood now that music was not just an art, but a gift, a way to connect, inspire, and leave a lasting mark. And as she played into the quiet night, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her music had found its voice, and that her journey had only just begun.